guys, Tom here from Metalloud, and welcome to the end of the year. We're going to be taking a look back at all that 2015 gave us, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. To kick things off, we're going to start with the top 10 most memorable albums of 2015. Now, just as a reminder, this list is not ordered by any sort of ranking. Number 1 is not more memorable than number 5, and number 10 is no less more memorable than number 6. So without further ado, let's get to it.
Number 10.
So we're going to start things off with a progressive metal album from Connecticut-based band Earthside. Now, you've probably seen me kind of promoting this album as much as I can because I really think it's just that great of an album. And when you throw in the fact that this is a debut from these guys, I mean, they've all been playing music for a while, but this is the first release as Earthside, and it really does not feel like a debut. It doesn't feel like these guys are finding themselves or honing their craft. It feels like they've been doing this for years. You know, this feels like it's a 10th album from a band, not the first album that we get from this band. Everything is just produced fantastically. Nothing gets lost in the sound. Nothing's muddled. There's not many tracks that have vocal work on them. There's a few definitely in there, and that all the vocal work is done by guest vocalists from other metal bands, people like LaJohn Witherspoon and Daniel Tompkins, who just provide just amazing vocal work on these tracks. It doesn't feel like they're just, you know, went to a studio and just phoned it in here. It really sounds like these songs were written for these vocalists to come in and do their thing. And the other part is the fact that all the instruments in this band work so well together. Oftentimes when you throw in orchestras into some songs, like their kind of hit song Mob Mentality, you really kind of overpower the other instruments, and sometimes orchestras just feel unnecessary in a song, or they don't feel like they really fit the song. They kind of feel like they're just thrown in there. But with particularly Mob Mentality, it really does enhance the sound. It doesn't take away from anything. It doesn't overpower anything. You know, it doesn't feel like this was a orchestra song. It feels like this is a metal song that happens to incorporate an orchestra into it. And with that said, also a main part of the band, the keyboards. Keyboards a lot of times can really sound cheesy in songs, especially metal songs. They really just kind of don't fit in too well, and they kind of fall out from the rest of the instruments. But here they are an integral part of their sound, and it really does work. It doesn't sound like here's, you know, the song and then here's a keyboard part. It sounds like if the keyboard part wasn't in the songs, then there wouldn't be a song. It would just be a mess. So that's pretty much it for Earthside's debut, A Dream in Static. This is, again, a fantastic album. I suggest going out and supporting. They actually just got back from a kind of cross-country tour, so congrats to those guys on that. And, you know, I hope to see more from them in the future.
Number 9.
So another band that you've probably seen me promoting as much as possible is Hot Gospel. These guys released a free 3-song EP recently. You can get it off of their Bandcamp. It is an excellent start to this band, an introduction to this band. It features 1 original song and 2 cover songs. As I mentioned in my review, I'm not usually a huge fan of cover songs, particularly from metalcore bands. I think they really just don't do the original songs justice. They end up sounding like metalcore songs without any kind of hint of what the original was trying to do, or the spirit of the original, or anything like that, and it usually ends up as a mess. And I say that because their cover of Whole Lotta Love, which is probably one of my favorite songs from Led Zeppelin, probably one of Led Zeppelin's best songs that they've ever written, is just great. It really does capture that original spirit, and the vocal work is really kind of reminiscent of something that Robert Plant probably would have done if he was fronting a metalcore band today. And I think that is just fantastic, and the whole mentality of that carries over throughout their music. Their other cover wasn't as great, but it's still well done. It's not, anything that is bad or you should just dismiss. Their original song is fantastic, and I would love to hear more of that. These guys have more of a kind of rock and roll feature to them. Like I said, they're reminiscent more of bands like The Chariot or Every Time I Die, and not really these cookie cutter metalcore bands that you kind of hear. There's no gent sounding in there or anything like that. And overall, for a 3-song EP, I really think it deserves it. As one of the most memorable albums of this year. It's not a full album. It's, like I said, it's just 3 songs, and 2 of them are covers, but they're so well done that, they really do deserve the recognition to put something out like that, because not every band is doing it. And like I said, particularly with the cover song, it's so hard for a metalcore band to nail a cover, especially of something of that era. So as my number 9 pick, I'm definitely choosing Hot Gospel's Love Songs EP. You can go out and download it right now for free.
Number 8.
Number 8 is Hodera's United by Bird Calls. Madera is another relatively new band. I just discovered them. They just put this out again this year. I believe they had a few songs released previously. So coming out on the record label All Sounds. This is definitely an album that has been stuck in my head repeatedly. It's a very emotional album, but it's also a very cathartic album at the same time. Listening to these songs and relating to everything, and the lines that just stick out in your head and stay stuck with you, and it's hard to talk about this album just because it is that good, and it really does kind of hit personally, especially when I'm talking about being relatable. You hear these things and you're like, that's exactly how I feel. I've never been able to express it this way. And the vocal work is great on it. He's got this very soulful voice to him. It sounds like he's been through some pain, and it really does show in these songs. And the guitar work as well, it's kind of subdued, but at the same time it's definitely powerful and stating a message. The drumming on it is great, and these guys live are just absolutely fantastic. You listen to the album feels a little bit, like I said, subdued, a little bit on the softer end of things, and almost more fitting of like an acoustic show or something like that. But if you watch these guys live, and I really suggest you do, as I'm making this video, they are on tour in the UK. They go hard as shit on their sets. It's crazy to watch them. I mean, I've seen them go harder than metalcore acts and things like that, and hardcore acts, and it's crazy to hear a band like Hodera, or see a band like Madera just go nuts on stage like that. And their stage presence is just so commanding, and once you see them live and then listen to the album again, you kind of have this whole new perspective on it. So I definitely want to say that Hodera's United by Bird Calls is definitely one of the best albums of 2015. Go ahead and check them out. They are also on Bandcamp.
Number 7.
So Melanie Martinez Crybaby is her debut album, coming up off of her EP last year, which was called Dollhouse. And one of the concerns I had going from her EP, which was kind of underground a little bit, even though she was featured on The Voice and a lot of people did know her from that, her album itself, her actual EP, was not really well known, I would say. She obviously has a lot of fans, she's huge, but I would say mainstream wise, you don't really hear her on the radio, you don't really hear people talking about Melanie Martinez that much, so she kind of flies under the radar a little bit. But I was worried that Crybaby would be her way of breaking into the mainstream, and I felt like some of her songs were going to get, or her style at least, was going to get muted in the transition of going from that kind of flying under the radar underground artist to something that could be played on the radio and something mainstream. Fortunately, I had no reason to worry. This album is dark as hell, and it is so much fun to listen to. It's something that, especially kids who listen to emo music or, metalcore or things like that, who definitely can relate to these pop songs. You know, the production is fantastic. These, you know, the hip hop samples, the beats that are going on, the bass drums, everything there is just easy to listen to and kind of catchy as hell. Her vocal delivery can definitely be a little bit jarring. I can understand how somebody may not like it, or it might take some getting used to. Particularly, I do enjoy it. I definitely feel it is off the beaten path. She's not like every other artist out there, and she can still definitely sing and belt out all those notes. You know, nothing feels like it was auto-tuned or gone over and, you know, just polished up. It feels like her voice, and if you've heard her singing live, you know her voice sounds like this, and it's well done. Lyrically, like I said, this album is dark and fun. I mean, these lyrics that she has where she compares saying I love you to somebody to throwing a toaster in a bathtub, and that's how a lot of us can feel. You know, saying I love you to somebody is a big step, and especially if it's unrequited, a lot of times it can feel like committing suicide in that way. And it's just, you know, the thing she comes up with metaphorically throughout this album is just so relatable and so interesting to hear. It's not something you hear from other artists, especially pop artists, and especially accessible pop artists like Melanie Martinez. So any fears and doubts I may have had about you know, her transition from her EPs and her song releases and things like that to a full-length album that she's releasing were definitely unfounded. This is a great album, and I really do suggest supporting her.
Number 6.
So next up we have Runaway Brother with their debut album, Mother. Now, I've been comparing Runaway Brother to the band Say Anything. I feel like it is such an apt comparison, and I don't mean that as a, you know, oh, they're copying Say Anything, or, you know, they're ripping off Say Anything's style or anything like that. I mean, it's so good to hear this style done in a different way with Runaway Brother. You know, they definitely are incorporating different elements, and it works so well to stand out on their own. And this is such a great debut from the band. You know, this is a great way to get introduced to the band. You know, if you haven't heard their EPs in the past, Mother is a perfect way to get introduced to them, and it's, you know, definitely produced well. This is indie rock at its best. It's full of these witty one-liners and these crazy rock change-ups. You know, you start the end of the song, you're gone through so many change-ups throughout that, you know, it almost feels like you've listened to 3 songs, but not in the tiresome way. You're not going to feel like, you know, oh, I can't believe this is still the same song. You know, you're going to be thinking, I want to hit that repeat button because I want to hear that part where it went from that slow kind of soft to that crazy breakdown and, you know, back again. And, you know, each song is its own kind of journey in that way. That, you know, Runaway Brother has this style to them that really is unmatched in the industry. You know, they're just such a great young band that, you know, I really think they definitely deserve more recognition. And as a debut album, this, you know, doesn't get much better than Mother. There's so much there. You know, each song is different, and then there's so many different songs for everyone. You know, you're probably going to find something that you like on this album if you're, you know, into the more kind of flashy rock, or if you kind of like a more pop sensibility to your rock, or if you like the softer songs, chances are you're going to find a song at least to listen to and love on this album.
Number 5.
Bring Me the Horizon are kind of a band that a lot of people love to hate, and I did understand that for a while because they never really did anything special with their first couple albums. They were just generic metalcore, deathcore albums. They never really stood out. I mean, I could see how they were popular in that sense, that they really were inoffensive to anyone. You know, they did what they did, and you know where you were going with the Bring Me the Horizon song. Their last album, however, really surprised me in the way that it changed things up. It incorporated more than just metalcore. There were a lot of electronic work and ambient sounds going on, and the vocal work was greatly improved from Oliver Sykes there. and there was definitely a transition in that point from the more screaming, hard, and harsh metalcore, definitely to a more methodical sound, and That's the Spirit is a drastic change from even that. You know, the last album, Sempiternal, still had a lot of the elements of their previous work. You could be heard, you know, if you were a fan of Bring Me the Horizon in the past, chances are you did like that album still. That's the Spirit really changes things up, and it really kind of feels like they're trying something different, and it does work, and I commend them for that. And that's why they're coming out on this list here, not because, you know, it's a perfect album or anything, and it's still a great album to listen to, but it's the fact that they took such a risk with this album and really try to branch out, you know, even if they're kind of branching into that mainstream alternative rock sound. A lot of songs like Throne, which is pretty much a Linkin Park song, they really did something different with That's the Spirit, and I commend them for that. There's not a lot of bands, especially bands with the popularity of Bring Me the Horizon, that are willing to do that. And, you know, I can understand how this might be alienating to some fans, but once you get past the change, you're going to find something that you love. And, you know, this album is borderline a pop album, especially some of the songs on there. The opening track, with its heavy electronic use, they're just different. It's really hard to describe it, and that's why it's on here. It's such a memorable album because of how different it is and the risk that it takes. And it works, it pays off for the band, and it still has the sensibilities of Bring Me the Horizon. You know, it's a more mature Bring Me the Horizon. They're not writing lines like "the sun goes down and so does she" anymore. They've definitely put a lot more thought into these songs, like the song "Drown" in particularly. The lyrics on that song are moving and kind of powerful there. But, you know, again, I definitely understand how this album may not be for everyone, especially for fans of Bring Me the Horizon, but I really think they should get kind of past that change. And if you really haven't liked Bring Me the Horizon in the past, I think now is a good time to get into them. You know, they are certainly changing their sound, and it's working for them, and it is you know, something that I would like to see them do more. You know, experimentation, and just give us different styles and different sounds, and, you know, let's.
Number 4.
So if you know me and if you see my videos and hear me talk about music, one of the things that particularly draws me to music is complexity in music. I like change-ups in songs. I like, you know, genres like mathcore, you know, that just throw everything at you, and, you know, you never know what to expect stylistically. And that's one of my favorite things about music and the music that I listen to, and one of the things that really draws me to it is how complex it can be, and how interesting it can be. And Diet Sig, honestly, are the exact opposite of what I normally like in music. They are stripped down and simple, just a guitar and drums, and, you know, simple style and simple lyrics, and it's great. You know, like I said, normally what draws me is complexity, but here the simplicity is what actually works in these songs. You know, they're so powerful with what they do. You know, they take so little and do so much with it that it ends up working, and you just have so much fun listening to them. You know, the song Harvard, which has generally been stuck in my head and been on my playlist for the longest time this year, is such a great kind of fuck you song. And like I said, it's so simple. There's really not a whole lot to it, but it's just done so well. And, you know, for an AP here, I really think that they've given us something that everyone can enjoy, and it really is a memorable EP. It does stick out. You know, the other songs on there, like Pool Boys, you know, it's just the fact that they do so much with so little. in their sound that works, and it's the exact opposite what normally draws me to music, and I found myself just enjoying it so much that, you know, it couldn't not end up on this list.
Number 3.
So Marietta's As It Were is an album that really grew on me this year. I did a review for it for the alternative earlier when it released, and I definitely enjoyed the album, but it wasn't really sticking with me that much. You know, I felt like it was definitely a standout album, but nothing that I was probably going to go back to that often. And what surprised me is how often I am going back to it. You know, many of these songs have been on my playlist throughout the entire year, and I will hit that repeat button, and they're songs that I don't skip in my car normally. And you know, this album really is something that you kind of have to listen to a few times, and then it's just gonna catch. It's another album that's definitely very kind of simplistic in its stylings. It's very bare bones, and it's definitely a good thing. Lyrically, it's clever, it's ripping. You know, I like the metaphors that they use, like building tombs in the form of houses, things like that they use in here. And it surprisingly has ended up being one of my most memorable albums of this year. I definitely suggest checking them out. I've never seen them live, so I can't really speak to how their live shows are, but what it translates to on an album is just so much energy and just done so well here. You know, it really is something that has stuck with me throughout this year, surprisingly enough. Like I said, not that I didn't like the album, I just felt like, yeah, it's good, but it's really not going to be something I'm going to be going back to constantly. And that's kind of what I want to repeat here. It's just that's what surprised me, and that's why it became one of my most memorable albums here.
Number 2.
So Skindred actually ended up on my best of list last year with their album Kill the Power, and 1 year later they've given us another great album called Volume. Now, I've always kind of been a fan of Skindred with what they've done, and I really think people don't give them enough credit and kind of dismiss them as being this, you know, new metal band, because they kind of came out during that time frame, and I really think that they've done more, especially how they've kind of honed their craft on these albums, last two that they've given us throughout the year, where they've incorporated, you know, everything from ska and dub and dubstep and hip-hop and electronic work and metal, and it's so much that they poured into this album, and there's really no bad song on this album. You know, even the last year there were a couple songs that I didn't really enjoy that much. I felt like there were some that just really were so unpleasant or not fitting. This year, Volume really doesn't have that. There's some songs that aren't that memorable, that aren't that great on here, but the ones that are really kind of stick with you, particularly the opening track, you know, and it's just that there's really no bad on here. There's nothing that kind of makes you just think, you know, oh, they really should have spent more time on this. You know, there's nothing that betrays how short of a time frame it was between these two albums. And I've gone back and I keep listening to this album. You know, there's a lot to like here.
Number 1.
So this is the sophomoric album of this current Dance Gavin Dance lineup, featuring Tillian Pearson as the clean vocalist again. You know, after he replaced Johnny Craig, who departed the band again. And I really think this is the best Dance Gavin Dance has ever been. I think Tillian and John Mess really just do so well together, and they really kind of bounce off each other so well and complement each other, between John Mess's screaming and Tillian Pearson's vocal work. And that's probably the best part of this album, is Tillian Pearson really seems to kind of be spreading himself on this album, you know, and just relaxing a bit, and you hear a lot more from him. You hear more of his range, and it's not just highs, and it's not just kind of singing as much as it was, and the smoothness as it was on their last album, Acceptance Speech. with this album, Instant Gratification, he's really kind of branching out a bit more and kind of gets into more grungier sound. I mean, he's really a clean vocalist. He doesn't really scream or anything like that. That's where John Ness comes in. But it's just, he's still kind of going into that style a little bit more. It's not just high-pitched, or it's not just smooth singing. And obviously Will Swan with his guitar work is just mind-blowing, as always on this album. It's these really awesome funky grooves and metalcore riffs, and just it's great. Points sounding almost like it could be like a disco song for the modern age. There's pop sounds in here. The only thing I didn't like about this album is one track in particular, which is Eagles vs. Crows, where there's just this random kind of rap part in it, and it's just awful and kind of cringeworthy, and it's so unfitting of the rest of the album. Their last album, Acceptance Speech, had a particular song that didn't fare too well, but even that, it was only the lyrics that kind of brought it down. This whole track is just awful. Other than that's it. That's the only thing this album really kind of does wrong. Obviously Dance Gavin Dance aren't for everyone. They're a little bit on the weird side. People aren't really gonna like everything that they do, but I think that this album particularly is definitely a memorable album that is going to have songs that are stuck in your head, continuously throughout. So that was my top 10 most memorable albums of 2015. What did you guys think? What were your top 10 albums, or just the most memorable albums for you guys this year? As always, I love hearing from you, so go ahead and leave anything you want to say down below in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button, and if you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe to the channel.